How's it going, everyone? My name is Jake, and I'm back with a new mix walkthrough series. In this series, we're going to be listening to a jazz tune and incorporating some different mix techniques to a very different set of musical elements. In this series, I'm going to try and change up my organization a little bit and start trying to think about the steps that we take throughout our mix instead of doing a free-form style and just walking through the mix. So hopefully that will help to break everything into sections for you. So starting with a different genre, such as this funky jazz fusion type genre, all that's really changing is the way you approach the mix. All of the concepts that you use are the same. You know, subtractive EQ, additive EQ, compression, those are all still there. However, the way that you look at each element needs to change and adapt to the genre. So for example, while we're starting to mix the drums here of this jazz composition, the first thing that I want to look at is actually going to be the cymbals, because the cymbals take kind of priority and are the main element of the drums that needs to come through, versus where a pop song, it would be completely different. It would be the kick and the snare are, you know, the core elements that keep it going, and you really want it to like pop and groove and really stick out, have a lot of punch, you know. However, with the jazz genre, we kind of want to change that up and think of like smooth. We want it to swing, we want it to flow well, and the cymbals are very main and important part of that mix. So we're going to start by working on these cymbals here. And our first step to doing that, just as anything else, you know, same core concepts, is we want to start by adding some subtractive EQ. So we're going to pull up our EQ 7 band here. And just like the overheads in a different genre, we don't want to take out too much, because there's the overheads are picking up so much, and as you'll hear, the overheads even pick up a lot of the horns. So we want to be careful with what we are taking out. However, we still want to pay some attention to any negative frequencies that could be hurting the cymbals. So we'll start off with our high pass filter here. And as always, we want to bring it up to where we can start to really hear it and dial it back. You're hearing a lot of, mostly the snare. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go find a spot where there's some cymbals. I believe there's some right here. Awesome, there we go. I'm actually going to loop that up. Bring that up a little bit more. Awesome, just clears out that low end and gives us some space for other elements such as the kick and bass. So let's do some sweeps here. I'm gonna start with the mid frequencies, because I really don't think there's gonna be anything too low that will be affecting us. That has just a lot of airiness that's coming through, so I'm going to be taking some of that out. Because even though it's affecting the snare a lot, that sound is still going to be coming through in the mix. So we want to take some of this out. We want to make the overheads sound as good as they can. Move up to our high mid frequencies. Mostly trying to continue to just listen to the cymbals. That is the main element that we're looking to fix here. Bring down a little bit of that. finally move up to our high frequencies here, see if there's anything. A little bit of weird airiness sounding right there, so we're going to bring out some of that. Awesome. So we don't want to take out too much of the high end. The high end has a lot of important frequencies for these overheads. But now we're going to move on to step 2 in the process, which will be additive EQ. Now with the overheads, there are two plugins that I like to use a lot, as they have a bit more control over the subtlety and how intense you can make them, and it's this earth and air EQs here. I like to use these as they sound very natural in their effects, while also giving you the option of really cranking in extra airiness or extra thickness into the mix. So I really like using these for overheads that are encompassing several elements. So let's see here. Let's start with our low end. Gonna increase our earth all the way. Gonna sharpen the knee of our slope. And start off maybe around 200 hertz. And really listen to see where our cymbals are getting thickness. Bring that back to around 6 dB. I like it. Let's go over to our air. Bring it up all the way to 18, increase the knee. We're going to start sweeping maybe around 2K and up. Kind of looking for not as much airiness, but more of the bell sound, to give the cymbals more character, more of a lead type feel. Awesome, I think that sounds pretty good. Now let's copy and paste them over to both cymbals so we can have our full overhead set. So even just alone, you can almost keep that as the drum kit in itself. However, we do have the kick and snare at our disposal, so what I'm going to use these for is essentially making the kick a lot thicker and bringing out the snare a lot more. And essentially helping the sound that's already there with just these overheads. However, I'm very happy with the sound of the drums just using these overheads. So moving forward, this should just help even further. So as we move forward, I do want to start bringing these down so that we don't clip our master fader. Lower everything a good 9-10 dB. Let's go to our EQ. Our first step in this process will be Subtractive EQ. Dialing it back even raise that up a little bit. Start doing our sweeps. That's a bit rough. I'm gonna try and pinpoint the worst frequency here. That is very unclean, so we're gonna take quite a bit of that out. Gonna go look around, see our low mid frequencies here. That sounds kind of hollow, so we're going to bring some of that out. Go to our mid frequencies. Has a lot of ringing. Move up to our high mids. Looking for those sounds that do not coincide with the natural sound of the snare. Things that you would not think of as a snare. Just gonna bring out a little bit of this 3. Taking away a lot of that thickness there. Gonna add some back in with our additive EQ. So let's see what we can do to kind of bring some of this thickness back into our snare. Gonna go to our EQ, virtual mix rack. We want to keep that 7-band EQ up here for reference. Now we have a lot of things that have been subtracted from this low end, so we don't have a lot of room to work with. However, we do want to bring a lot of that back, that thickness back. So we're going to start by looking through 208 and 311 hertz. There should be something in there that will help us kind of regain some of that snare power. So starting at 210. That seems pretty powerful, around 267. Gonna bring in a good amount of that. Let's see if there's anything a bit higher, around 780 to 3K hertz. Once again, with this additive, if there's nothing that's coming out to you right away as a beneficial frequency, I usually just leave it. This is only there if you know it's going to actually help. So see, if you like listen to this 914 here, with even a boost of 15 dB, it's not bringing out any sounds that don't sound like a snare, that don't sound like the normal snare. It's just accentuating its own qualities. So I like that. I'm going to bring that up. So that's sounding pretty solid to me. Let's see what we did. Cleans it up. I like it. We're going to move forward. Let's add it in here. Awesome. Let's move on to the kick. Lower it down. Gonna solo out the kick here so we can more accurately do our subtractive EQ, the first step of our process. Bring up the high pass filter. Awesome, that's about right. I'm gonna leave us some room for the bass here. Let's go to our first set of sweeps. That does not sound very pretty. Let's go to our low mid frequencies. Really focusing on the kick. You know, nothing too bad there. It has just a lot of weird ringing, so I'm going to bring some of that out. Because what that's going to do is essentially, I mean, even though there's not a lot going on up there, the whole track, I'm not going to be gating anything as I did in the last episode, so all the bleed coming through can end up affecting the song, affecting the overall sound. So by taking that out, I'm not affecting the snare all that much, but more of the other sounds that are coming through. Finally, I'm just going to add a little bit of a low pass filter. Just to kind of give us a little bit more headroom. Let's move on to step 2. Additive EQ, virtual mix rack, bring up our FGN, gonna increase the thickness here. And we gotta look for what we have in our Subtractive EQ. All we took out was this 191, which is gonna give us a lot of room to kind of thicken it up between 128 and 191 and see if there's anything that's gonna help us. I do want that in our view for reference though, so we're gonna bring that back up. And we have a lot of room to work with. However, we're just looking to add a little bit more thickness to this and a little bit of contrast to the rest of the drum kit. Nothing that I think is actually going to really help us there, so I'm going to actually start looking between around 200 to 538. I'm going to take this out just because we don't have the right bands. I'm going to bring out the FGS. So we're going to start at 200, see if there's anything. That's good. We're going to think about more of a snap, more of the body of the kick. I'm liking that 370. If you really listen, it's just bringing out those middle frequencies of the kick and nothing much else. So we're just going to bring this down. Awesome. You know what? I'm going to keep it right there. And that's going to give us a lot of room to work with when we start adding the bass in. So before we call this good to go on the drums here, I'm going to add one more thing. And what I want to do is the same thing with what I did with the pop rock drums, is add ourselves a little bit of a snare reverb here. So we're going to add ourselves a stereo auxiliary input. We're going to call it snare reverb. And once again, what we want to do with this is essentially not give the snare a reverb, but just thicken, like make the snare seem wider, make it seem a little bit larger. As we did take out a lot of low frequencies, and those low frequencies kind of reduced the body of the snare, which is what we're going to try to recreate here, except in the way that we want to. So we have our reverb. We need to make our sends +1, 2. Going to bring it up to 0. Make sure that we're getting signal here. Oh yeah. So like I said, I really like to use plate reverbs when we use our specific snare reverb. So we're going to look at our plates. Look at our snare plate here. I really like that sound. Now we want to find the decay time. I already know that our tempo, as if you look here, is 108. So the formula for this is 60,000 divided by their tempo, which in this case is 108. And that will give us our reverb time in milliseconds. So 555 seconds will be our reverb time. So bring this down to 555. Oops. We're as close as we can get to 555. $562 it is. All right. Now what I also want to do is I want to add a little bit of a pre-delay. Pre-delays always sound pretty solid on the snare. So it's we're going to bring it up to around 5.5 milliseconds if we can to start. I'm just going to take a look and see what a higher pre-delay will sound like. I'm actually going to like the higher pre-delay on this one. We're going to lower the amount that is being sent, amount of signal being sent. I think what we're going to do is increase the lows a little bit. Dial it back. No, actually I don't like that so much. I take that back. That mid sounds better. Awesome. Let's see what we got. Sounded pretty good to me. So this will be the end of our first episode. Hopefully you can kind of see how I tackled this drum kit a little bit differently than I did with the pop rock series. Just because the application of the drums for this genre of music is different than it would be in pop rock. So you can kind of see how the mixing process changes when you have a new type of genre and a new feel that you want to go for. So moving forward, in the next episode, we'll be once again tackling the rhythm section, incorporating some upright bass, and seeing how that all comes together in a jazz tune. So hope you learned something, and hopefully I'll see you in the next episode.